Seeing yourself in that other person is the space of compassion. And when you arrive in the space of compassion, naturally you've arrived in a space of forgiveness.
This is The Deep Dive with Adam Roa.
Yo, yo, yo. What is up, deep divers? Welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive podcast. I am Adam Roa, and we're doing a musing today, which means it's just you and me. We're diving into my head and what's going on. And today's theme is going to be forgiveness, because I want to unpack the lyric from my most recent song, Voices, which is, if I forgive you, is that weak or is that devotion? And so we're going to dive into forgiveness based on my experience of being lied to again in relationship with a woman that I loved very, very, very much. And to be lied to hurt really deeply. And I would wake up at 3 a.m. pretty much every night in a row for a week, unable to get back to sleep, as these voices in my head just continued to go all over the place, asking the question, should I forgive her? Is that what true love is, to forgive? Or is true love me actually owning a boundary and saying no more? I value honesty and integrity, and I am taking a stand here. And is that love? Is that the loving choice? And I really got to face off with the components of forgiveness, what it takes to arrive at forgiveness, and the misconceptions around what forgiveness even looks like necessarily. And so that is going to be the topic and theme for today's podcast. Before diving into that, I want to read one of these epic reviews, which is from Alyssa Music LA, which says, "Thank you, Adam. I discovered this podcast at the perfect divine time. I am so appreciative to discover your insights, and this podcast has been beyond supportive. The synchronicities have induced laughter, tears, and such deep healing. I am grateful. Thank you for sharing your gifts." Thank you, Alyssa Music LA. I really appreciate you taking the time to leave a review. For those of you who are getting value out of this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you just take 30 seconds out of your day and leave a review on iTunes. It helps with the algorithm and spreads this podcast far and wide so that more people can receive these messages and we can rise together. Right? This information is all about awareness. And if more people have the awareness, they have more choice, and we can make more loving choices, whatever that looks like to each and every one of you. So thank you, Alyssa. And thank you to all of you who are going to take a moment to leave that review and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify and all the places. As for the lyric that I'm unpacking today, if I forgive you, is that weak or is that devotion? I've learned a lot since originally writing that down. You know, when I was in that space, I didn't know if forgiveness was a weakness. I didn't know if I said, okay, I forgive you, if that meant that I wasn't strong enough to own my own boundaries. I wasn't strong enough to stand my ground. And it's hard to face off with the part of yourself that is wanting to be strong, but feeling so weak. And I really began to unpack forgiveness and what it actually means. And I find that there's kind of 3 steps that lead to forgiveness. And the first step is feeling your feelings. At the end of the day, in order to even arrive at a space where we can make a decision around forgiveness, it requires us to feel our emotions. And that takes time. There's really not a way around that. We can speed that process up by certain activities. You know, for me, sometimes just screaming. Going outside or using a pillow or going underwater in a bath and just screaming to allow those feelings out. For those of you who watch my YouTube show, The Art of Choosing Love, you also know that crying is a very big one for me. I cry quite a bit in terms of processing my emotions. And through that processing of the emotions, we start to shift our lens. Okay, because if someone has done something that has triggered you to the point of it would require your forgiveness to even continue a relationship with them, then you are seeing them and you are seeing the entire situation through your lens of emotion. And that emotional response, especially in my case, it was, it's not that I was cheated on. That would be inaccurate to say that. It was more of the, Ross and Rachel thing from Friends. We were on a break. And so having that experience and having her connect with another dude and then come back and hook up with me again and then lie about it, felt like being cheated on. And as someone who's been cheated on in the past, it brings up a lot of painful memories and wounds and feelings of not being enough and all of that. And as I'm going through that experience, I'm seeing the entire situation and her actions through the lens of my pain. I'm seeing it through the lens of my anger. I'm seeing it through the lens of my jealousy. And all of those different emotions are present. All of them are there. And so the process of feeling my feelings is like slowly removing these lenses of my own painful triggers. Because ultimately what I want to get to is the second stage of this, which is understanding. The second step to forgiveness for me is in understanding why they may have done what they did. And this isn't a necessity. Like there may be situations where you're never given an opportunity to ask them why. But with that said, you don't necessarily need their perspective to have the understanding. What is important in forgiveness is for you to arrive at something that makes sense to you as far as why they may have done what they did. And if you don't do the first step of feeling all of your feelings and acknowledging and recognizing your lens, then what happens is the understanding can only come through your hurt perspective. And I think it's a very rare thing for human beings to take action maliciously. I don't think it's very common for humans to say, I'm going to do this because it's going to hurt this person that I love so much. And so with that in mind, I feel my feelings, and that allows me to have a little bit less charge when evaluating why this human has done what they've done. And I work really hard to find the space of love. I've talked about this in previous podcasts, where can we find the love? In my last podcast, I literally talked about, can you see the actions of this other person and really ask why they did that and why they did that and why they did that until you eventually arrive at the space of, here's the love. Let's take an example here of someone like a Donald Trump. There are a lot of people listening to this, just because I know you as my audience, there are a lot of people listening to this who don't agree with a lot of the actions that he takes. And you could look at some of the actions that he takes as not being in the best interest of a large proportion of the population. But if you were to synthesize it down and down and down, I think that you would arrive ultimately at something where you could find where he's doing what he's doing out of a self-protection belief system for him and his family. He's essentially putting his family first and saying what's good for me to make as much money as possible so I can provide for my family, protect them, make sure my grandkids and their grandkids are taken care of forever. I'm willing to do this and this and this in order to make that happen. But at the core of that, there's still love. It might not be for the strangers that are affected by his decisions, but it's for his family or it's for himself. So when we arrive at that space of love, that's the understanding that I'm talking about in this second step. So when I was evaluating the reasons why this human that I loved so much had chosen to lie to me again, I realized that she was so scared of losing me that she was willing to lie. She was willing to go out of integrity in order to prevent me from being hurt and keep open a possibility of reuniting and staying together. That was the way that she was trying to do those things. So there was love at the root of her actions, and I can see that and I can understand that. Which brings me to the third step around forgiveness: compassion. For me, when I can find the love, when I go through the process of understanding to arrive at the love, that then opens me up to the part of myself that can have compassion for her. When I can arrive at, let's use the Donald Trump again as an example. When I can see that there's some love there in terms of protecting his family, I can find the compassion because I can see that part in myself. If you're looking at anyone out in the world, from a racist to a rapist to a politician, and you have decided to dehumanize them and say they are not like me, we don't have any values in common, they're monsters, they're awful. If that's the space that you're in, it is going to be very, very hard for you to arrive at a space of compassion. However, if you can arrive at an understanding of where the love is, that's going to be easier for you to spot within yourself. It can be difficult to say, wow, that person that went out and did those racist actions, I can see the angry part of me in them. Have you been hearing that you should love yourself more? Is that something that has consistently popped up in your space, but you're not exactly sure how to do that? That's why I created the course, It Starts With You, Self-Love Made Simple, because self-love is not simply turning on a light switch. It's not like you have it or you don't. It's actually the byproduct of the relationship that you have with yourself. And just like any other relationship in your life, if you want there to be love, it looks like how much time do you invest into it? And what do you do? What do you say? What are the activities that you put into those relationships? The same is true for yourself. And so what I've done is I've gathered 15 of the most impactful, powerful, potent exercises that have helped me reach millions with self-love. And I've put them into a video course so that you can apply them to your life and deepen your relationship with yourself, learn to love yourself more, increase your self-worth and your value, which will call in more financial abundance. It'll call in deeper connections with the people around you. It'll call in more joy and love and fun into this life. Because at the end of the day, while you may not be able to control everything that's happening around you, you can control how you respond to that. Directly the result of how much you love yourself and how much you feel your worth. And so if you have been looking for a way to increase your internal value system and up-level your entire life, I encourage you to check out my new video course, It Starts With You. And so it can be a harder jump to see someone who's racist and the actions that they're taking and say, wow, the anger in me is the same as the anger in them. That can be a bigger jump to arrive at that space of compassion, of seeing yourself in them. However, when you can go through the process of understanding to find the love, it can be much, much easier to find that love within yourself that you can relate to them. That person who's done an act of racism, if you can find the love from which their actions stem, which isn't always easy, if it can be boiled down to something as simple as they are so afraid that this other race is coming in and taking their jobs, for example. And what is that? That's a fear of not having your security of your job, the safety of your job. And what that means is you might be homeless, or your family might be, and again, arriving through the fears into a place of understanding, well, where does the love stem from? And say, wow, I can see those fears in myself, and I can see how those fears also stem from a love of my family, or a love of what I do, or a real desire to make an impact, or whatever it is. And that, seeing yourself in that other person, is the space of compassion. And when you arrive in the space of compassion, naturally you've arrived in a space of forgiveness. And while you may find that space of forgiveness, the tricky part is in what you do from there. I very quickly forgave this human for lying to me. I arrived at the space of understanding for where the love was and her fears, and I arrived in a space of compassion for that. I took ownership for my role in creating an unsafe relationship dynamic where she did not feel safe enough to tell me the truth. And through all of that, I had deep compassion. And in that space of compassion, I was able to forgive. And yet, forgiving doesn't mean you need to take that person back. Forgiving doesn't mean that you need to vote for that person. Forgiving doesn't mean that you have to be friends with them. It doesn't mean that you have to be business partners. It doesn't mean they need to be a part of your life. You may choose to never speak to them again. Forgiveness is for you. Because if you're holding on to that anger, if you're holding on to that jealousy, if you're holding on to that hurt, they don't even know it. That's affecting your life. It's affecting your lens, because everything happening inside yourself is the lens through which you're viewing the rest of life, and life will reflect that back to you. So if you're walking around holding grudges and pain and resentment from all of the past relationships that didn't end up going the way that you want them to, you will be seeing all of these reflections of that pain and all the ways you can't trust people and all the ways that people are going to take advantage of you. You are going to be seeing that in the outside world, and that will reflect. It will show up again and again and again until you shift internally and break that pattern. Forgiveness is for you. And so this process, once again, to break it down tangibly, if something has happened that deeply hurts you and you're in a space where you want to forgive, start by feeling your feelings. Start by allowing your emotions to arise and to give yourself the space, whether that means the time to do it, whether that means the support to understand what your feelings even are, whether that means a community in which you can talk about it. And if you want a community, by the way, thecreatecommunity.com. That is my online community where we have a very special group of humans that are coming together each and every week for this exact thing, to support each other in these processes. Whatever you need to feel your feelings, do it. Don't judge yourself for how long it's taking. Don't feel shame for the fact that you feel those things at all. Be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to feel. And then as you've began to process, you're going to start to see things differently. Allow yourself to find the understanding of where is the love at the root of their actions. If you need to go back to my last podcast to listen for tangible ways that you can do that, go and do that now, because we're building on this. That's what this journey is, deep divers. We are going on a journey together, and we are building step by step, creating the lives that we want. And so when you find that understanding of where the love is, you can connect to that, and you can see that loving piece of them in yourself, which is compassion. And from that space of compassion, you've now stepped into the ability to forgive, truly forgive for you, first and foremost. How you choose to respond from there is entirely up to you. But I can tell you that if you've gotten to a place where you've processed your emotions, you've understood it, you found the love in the situation, the decision that you make will ultimately be so much more supportive, so much more in alignment, and be another foundational piece of the life you ultimately want to live, which is one that's based in love. not your fear and your pain from past wounds. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you for being a part of the Deep Diver community. I appreciate and value you so much. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.